What is going on, everybody? If you saw the title of this video, you know Thursday Night Football Breakdown. It is officially the best time of the year, and in this video I'm going to break down everything we learned from Thursday night's game, who to buy, who to sell, who to trade for, and if you should or shouldn't panic on specific players. We're going to get to Jahmyr Gibbs, do not worry. But everything you need to know about the Thursday night game is going to be in this video. So if you want to stay ahead and get some good vibrations, like up this video and subscribe if you haven't already. You guys know me, I do not like to waste time in any video I've ever made, so let's get into it. The first lesson that we learned from Thursday night's game is Jahmyr Gibbs, and we have to start out with this because plenty of people across the world were starting Jahmyr Gibbs this week, including myself. Let's look into it. Jahmyr Gibbs finished with only 8 fantasy points, maybe a bit more or less depending on your league settings, but that is way lower than his projection of 14 or 15 that he was getting in the beginning of the week. But to answer your question, this is not a circumstance to start panicking on Jahmyr Gibbs. The main reason he got such a small workload is because a little bit before the game started, the Lions came out and said that they're going to keep Jahmyr Gibbs on a snap count because they wanted to keep him fresh for his first NFL game. Do I agree with this decision? Absolutely not. If you drafted a running back with your first overall pick that you had, why not start him? Running backs out of any position in the NFL have the shortest prime and shelf life, so why are you wasting it working him into the offense? But we do have to understand that it was his very first game in the NFL, and the dude's only 21 years old. Outside of that little disclaimer, there's no reason to panic on Jahmyr Gibbs. He will get more work as the season progresses. If we take a look at next week's matchup, he's going against the Seahawks, who is a bit of a tougher defense than the Chiefs, but I do think we have to go through and start Jahmyr Gibbs every single week regardless. Looking at the actual game, in the small sample size that we got of Jahmyr Gibbs, he clearly looked like the best running back on the field for both teams. He looked more explosive, more dynamic than David Montgomery, who we'll get into in this video. But Gibbs had 7 carries, 42 yards, and 6 yards per carry. He also had 2 receptions for 18 yards, a bit lower than what we expected. Everyone is just going to look at these 7 carries and say, he's a bust, he's not getting the work, he's never going to get the rushing work. But if you look at the deeper stats of these 7 rushing attempts, on those 7 attempts, he broke a tackle on 6 of them. To put that into perspective, DeAndre Swift had 24 broken tackles his entire season last year, and Jamal Williams had 30 broken tackles. At this rate, Jahmyr Gibbs only needs a third of the season to do that, and probably even less if they start playing him more, which they will. Obviously, broken tackles doesn't equate to fantasy points, but it means he's a good, efficient runner that needs to stay on the field. Obviously, Gibbs' receiving value will give him a floor, and this game was promising despite the fantasy point production. Besides him missing one hole he could have cut back for and slipped once, which is really just rookie mistakes, honestly. He looked really good, but let's go over and look at David Montgomery, who the Jahmyr Gibbs owners are hating right now. Coming into the season a couple weeks ago, David Montgomery's workload is nothing new. We knew that he was going to take the majority of the red zone work and a lot of the middle yards, and he's just built for it. He's bigger and stronger than Jahmyr Gibbs, and he's more experienced. But does this mean Gibbs will never get goal line work? No, it doesn't. But it will cap Jahmyr Gibbs' upside a little bit. Again, I don't think that goal line role will affect him fantasy-wise because of his receiving as much as the game flow will. If you looked at this Thursday night game, this was a pace game for the Lions. They were leading for a majority and they weren't coming from behind, which called for a more run-heavy scheme, and they didn't need Gibbs to do anything crazy. They just needed to control their possessions and get yards wasting clock. But on the other hand, when they're catching up in a high-scoring game or losing, that is a Jahmyr Gibbs flow game. They're going to be passing more, they're going to need more dynamic players, and that script is going to favor Gibbs more, and that's just something we need to be aware of moving forward. If you're in PPR leagues, always keep Jahmyr Gibbs. If you're in non-PPR leagues, David Montgomery might be the guy to keep in this team. But moving on to the Lions wide receivers, we should not be starting anybody other than Amon-Ra. This game clearly solidified Amon-Ra for being a top 2nd round pick. Nothing unexpected from Amon-Ra. You should be keeping him, not trading him away in any leagues. But speaking of the receiving options, Sam Laporta looked like a really viable option to this offense. He looked like a mini TJ Hawkinson. He was the number 2 option in this offense for receiving yards and targets. Now, obviously, he might move down to 3 if Jahmyr Gibbs gets more work, but still, number 2 in the pecking order of receptions is very good for a rookie tight end. What we saw from today, I wouldn't be surprised if he was legitimately startable in the coming weeks. But moving down to the Chiefs is where things get a little bit more interesting. Anybody that saw that game, which most of you, if not all of you, have noticed, is that Patrick Mahomes does need Travis Kelce in this offense. Mahomes still put up 20 fantasy points on the day without any receivers. But let's break the ice here on these receivers. Kadarius Toney. We have seen memes all over the internet of people making fun of this dude. I'm not gonna lie, it's rightfully so. He did not look good even a little bit. But I think I'm the only one that says this. I would not take that game from Toney out of context too far. He just came back to practicing a few days ago with his partially torn meniscus. He has not been playing with the team. Yes, that does not exclude the complete drops, wide open passes. But Patrick Mahomes was asked about Kadarius Toney's performance in the post-game presser, and obviously he's going to make it seem like it's not as big of a deal because he's a teammate and it's a business. But he said that they trusted him last year down the stretch of the playoffs, which they did. Yes, he had a bad game with his first game back, but it doesn't look like they're going to move off him, and it's pretty much impossible not to have a bounce back game from this week. Now, is he fantasy startable? No, not even a little bit. I really don't think any Chiefs receivers are startable for that matter in the near future. I do think Rashee Rice could possibly turn into something, and if we were to look look at these wide receivers for who has the best consistent value, from this week it looked like it could be him. But again, he had 5 targets for 3 receptions and a touchdown, which really saved his fantasy week. But nothing extremely exciting enough to where I feel like I have to start him, and none of you guys should be, until we find out the identity of this offense. The targets are just going to be peppered to everybody like they were last year and like they have been every single year since Tyreek Hill. Even with Juju last year, who you could consider as a wide receiver 1 compared to this wide receiver core, he wasn't targeted an insane amount. It was all spread out. It's the Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce show indefinitely, so I wouldn't be trusting any of these wide receivers unless they show us a reason why we should. You can bet that somebody will have a good breakout game every single week, making you want to pick them up or trade for them. It's going to be very random. I just would not trust them at all. But probably the more important note, the backfield was split 3 ways last night with Isaiah Pacheco, CEH, and Jahmyr McKinnon. Not what we wanted to see, but kind of what I expected. For the longest time, if you guys have been watching these videos, I've been saying that Isaiah Pacheco isn't my favorite running back target. This is kind of the reason why. I didn't really expect this running back room to change. If McKinnon is getting the majority of the receiving role, and apparently CEH is splitting and taking carries from Isaiah Pacheco in an offense that is already not very run heavy whatsoever, how much volume can there really be? His ceiling is capped. Isaiah Pacheco finished with 23 yards on the ground, finishing with 10 fantasy points. A majority of those came from his receptions though. But again, the Chiefs aren't a team that are going to rely on their run game. CEH took directly from Isaiah Pacheco's workload, and that's not going to be a one-time thing. As long as CEH is healthy at least, but that's moving Isaiah Pacheco down my rankings indefinitely now. Let's go into the trade section of this video. Am I trading these players away? Am I trading for any of them? Starting out with Jahmyr Gibbs, no, I am not trading away Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm trading for him if you can get him low. They had him on a snap count, which wasn't really publicly expressed from the team because it was right before the game started. You should not be worried about Gibbs. Any trade offers you do get if you own Gibbs is going to be a low ball. Do not take it. Unless you're in a non-PPR league, then I might consider trading Gibbs away if he has another good game, because the majority of his work is going to come from the receiving game. Looking at David Montgomery, I think he's going to be more of a touchdown dependent guy. He did have 0 targets and 0 receptions in last night's game, which is unheard of for him. I don't think that's happened at all last year. But again, this was a pace setter flow game for the Lions. I'm not taking this running back performance out of their ranges of fantasy finishes. I'm holding Montgomery. I'm not trading him away. I think he can be a good piece if Jahmyr Gibbs were to get injured or something, but obviously you can't predict that. Especially if you're in a non-PPR league, I'd keep David Montgomery. But the Chiefs receivers as a whole, Kadarius Toney, MVS, Sky Moore, I'm trading them all if I can, maybe even dropping them at the moment. I don't really know if it's worth a roster spot right now. If I had to pick, I think Sky Moore and MVS would be the more consistent wide receivers in this offense. But again, like I was saying earlier, they're all going to have their own boom week and everyone else is going to bust. So as soon as one of them have a really good game, I'm looking to trade them away. The only players you should rely on and start and have in this offense is Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce until they prove us otherwise. Sam Laporta, I wouldn't sell him. If you can pick him up off waivers, I would. I wouldn't drop guys like Cole Kmet or Greg Dulcich or Tyler Higbee to get him. For now, I'm just keeping my eye on him, and if I have an empty bench spot that I'm not using, I'll pick him up and stash him. Jared Goff, he looked decent. I wouldn't pick him up. I wouldn't trade for him. But if you have him on your team, I wouldn't quite drop him yet. He's really going to be capped by the team's rushing identity, and himself doesn't really get too many rushing opportunities. He does not scramble out of the pocket at all. Isaiah Pacheco, we can't take much from this game because he was dealing with a hip injury that happened early in the game, I'm pretty sure. That went under the radar, so I can't really take this game from Pacheco too seriously. Only 23 rushing yards that easily could have been because of his minor tweak injury. I'm pretty sure it's nothing serious. I would not sell Isaiah Pacheco. I would keep him on my team. I'm not quite sure if I would start him just yet until we get a definitive answer of how this backfield is going to be split up between the 3. But definitely don't drop him. Don't trade him. Just keep him for now. Jahmyr McKinnon, I think it's pretty safe to say you can drop him. Isaiah Pacheco was getting a little bit of receiving work, but if you're in a league that's 12 or less, there's really no reason you should be rostering him. Don't waste a roster spot on a guy that has capped upside. Monra, as always, trade for him. It will be kind of hard to trade for him after that performance though. But that is going to finish off this video. I appreciate all you guys tuning into this game day update. Let me know what you guys are doing with these players in the comments, and I will be in there answering all of your fantasy football questions as well, and I'll see you guys in the next video.